The grand hall of the Valine Empire shone with a pale blue light that bounced off crystal pillars and polished floors. Princess Soraya stood at the center, her silver skin almost glowing under the cold brilliance. Her hands trembled at her sides. She knew what was coming, and dread settled deep in her chest. The air was heavy with whispers. Courtiers and nobles leaned forward, their eyes sharp and cruel, barely hiding the amusement on their faces. Everyone knew her shame. Everyone in the empire knew. At the head of the hall, Empress Larethia sat on her throne, her posture perfect, her face cold as frozen metal. She did not look at Soraya. Her gaze swept over the assembled nobles as though her daughter were already invisible. "Soraya," the Empress said, her voice echoing through the hall, sharp and clear. "The humans have asked for an alliance. They wish to join our empire through marriage." Soraya's heart stopped. Her lips parted, but no words came. She was the youngest daughter, often forgotten, always overshadowed by her older sisters. And now she understood, this was not a favor. This was a trap. A label hung over her life like a shadow she could not escape. Infertile, worthless, broken. Royal doctors had examined her countless times and confirmed it over and over. She could never have children. That was why she had never mattered, why her family had avoided her eyes, why her name was only whispered behind gloved hands. The Empress's chief advisor, Lord Valine, stepped forward. He was tall, with a long, dark robe and eyes that seemed to pierce straight through her soul. He smiled, but it was not kind. "We have decided to grant the humans their wish," he said, voice dripping with amusement. "They will receive a princess." The hall erupted in laughter. The sound was cruel and hollow, echoing against the crystal walls. Soraya felt her chest tighten. She understood immediately. The Valine Empire was sending her, its so-called defective princess, as a mockery to the humans. They expected her to fail. They expected them to see her as worthless. They expected ridicule. And maybe, they even hoped she would return in shame, a living joke. "You will leave in 3 days," the Empress said without looking at her. She had not truly looked at her daughter in years. "Prepare yourself." That night, Soraya packed the few belongings she owned. Her sisters did not come to say goodbye. Her mother did not enter her chambers. Only the servants helped, heads bowed, eyes down. Even their sympathy felt shallow, forced. She realized she had never truly belonged in this palace. Every smile, every polite word, every cold nod of acknowledgement had been empty. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Alex Hunter sat in a government office in Washington, staring at documents that detailed his next mission. Humans had been chosen to receive a royal envoy from the Valine Empire, a chance to strengthen an interstellar alliance. And the envoy was Princess Soraya. Alex had been married once. His wife had died 5 years ago. He had no children, no family, and no reason to refuse the assignment. He read the papers again, noting that the Valine were an ancient, proud species. Their technology was beyond anything humans could imagine, and they looked down on humanity. He exhaled slowly. His role was clear. He was to host the princess and eventually marry her as part of this alliance. Meanwhile, on Valos, the departure ceremony for Soraya was small, barely 50 attendees. The modest transport ship, nothing like the fleet a real princess deserved, waited silently. Lord Valine gave a speech, his words proper, but every syllable laced with mockery. "Princess Soraya goes forth to represent our great empire. May she find happiness among the humans." The laughter behind gloved hands stung more than any insult could. Soraya looked toward her sister, Leora. The older girl was beautiful, fertile, and proud, a perfect image of the empire's ideal. Their eyes met briefly, and Soraya saw no pity, only relief that it wasn't her being sent away. As the ship lifted off, Soraya watched Valos shrink beneath her. The silver cities, the glowing crystal towers, the blue and purple continents of her homeworld. She felt no sorrow. There was nothing left for her there. Only anger burned deep, hotter than fear or sadness. They had sent her as a joke. They expected her to fail. The journey to Earth would take 12 days, and Soraya planned to spend each one alone in her cabin. She read every report on humans she could find. They were primitive, emotionally unstable, and fragile. Yet, one detail made her pause. Humans formed bonds, not through contracts or duty, but through something they called love. It was foreign, impossible, and somehow intriguing. Soraya clenched her fists. She had been sent as an insult. But she would not fail, not because of duty, not because of loyalty, but because for the first time in her life, she felt something her empire had never given her: purpose. The transport ship hummed quietly as it glided through the vast emptiness of space. Outside the viewport, stars stretched into lines, bright streaks against the dark void. Princess Soraya sat alone in her cabin, staring at the endless night. Her hands rested on the console in front of her, tense, waiting. Every nerve in her body was alert, as if the ship itself had a pulse she could feel. She had expected this journey to be humiliating, to face ridicule, mockery, and disappointment. That had been the purpose, after all. Yet, as she looked at the stars, a strange thought took root. What if this world of humans was not as simple as her empire believed? What if they were capable of something more? The ship's logs offered little comfort. They called humans primitive, impulsive, and fragile. Yet, in between the cold facts, there was one line that caught her attention. Humans valued choice. They chose their partners, their bonds, their families, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. The idea was alien. Among the Valoran, marriages were contracts, alliances sealed with bloodlines and status. Feelings were distractions, weaknesses to be ignored. But here, humans made decisions from the heart. That concept, simple and unassuming, struck her as both reckless and strangely beautiful. Soraya's reflection stared back at her in the glass. She hardly recognized the girl in the silver skin and violet eyes. She had been molded by expectation and disappointment, a ghost wandering through a palace that had never cared for her. Now, for the first time, the emptiness felt like a beginning, not an end. Days passed in silence, broken only by the occasional ship alert or navigation check. She spent her time studying human culture, their history, their habits, and their stories. Strange tales of courage, of determination, of ordinary humans overcoming impossible odds. The more she read, the more she felt a faint spark, a recognition that perhaps strength could come in forms her empire had never acknowledged. Finally, the ship entered the orbit of the blue-green planet. Soraya's stomach tightened as she looked out. Earth, a world alive with energy, cities that sparkled like clusters of stars, and forests that stretched endlessly. It was not the barren, primitive world she had imagined. It was vibrant, thriving, and inviting. When the ship landed, the air was different. It was heavier, warmer, richer than the sterile crystal atmosphere of Valos. The scent of trees, rain, and soil filled her senses. She stepped onto the landing platform, boots clicking against metal. Waiting for her were humans, military officers, diplomats, and one man in simple clothes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that seemed to look straight into her. He bowed. A real bow. Not mockery, not hesitation, but a gesture of respect. "Princess Soraya," he said, voice warm and steady. "Welcome to Earth. I'm Captain Alex Hunter. I hope your stay will be comfortable." Soraya blinked. The calm sincerity of his tone disarmed her. She had prepared for contempt, for ridicule, for the laughter of a species she had been taught to see as weak. Instead, she found kindness. "Thank you," she managed, her voice small. Alex smiled. "We have prepared a home for you. Nothing rushed. Take your time. Make it yours." As they walked to the waiting vehicle, Soraya cast one last glance at the transport ship. Behind her, Valos receded into the sky, a world of rules, judgment, and cruelty. Ahead lay something unknown, something untested, something human. She realized, in that moment, that the game had changed. The insult had been designed to humiliate her, but now, she held the power to turn it into opportunity. The humans did not see her as broken. They saw her as a person. And perhaps, for the first time in her life, she could see herself that way too. The vehicle carried her toward the countryside. Rolling hills, dense forests, and rivers glinting in the sunlight stretched endlessly. The house that would be her temporary home stood modestly on a hilltop, wooden walls contrasting the crystal palaces of her birth. It was warm, alive, human. She inhaled deeply. The world was strange, yet full of possibilities. As the sun dipped behind distant mountains, Soraya felt something new stir in her chest. Not hope. Not yet. But something close, something dangerous and thrilling. Perhaps the humans, primitive as they seemed, could teach her a lesson her empire never had. That worth was not measured by perfection, nor strength by power, but by courage, choice, and the heart. And for the first time in her life, Soraya felt ready to test that idea. The morning sunlight poured through the wooden windows of Soraya's new home, casting warm patterns on the floor. Outside, birds called, and leaves rustled in a gentle breeze. The air smelled alive, full of life and promise. Soraya stood silently, taking it all in. On Valos, mornings were sharp, metallic, sterile. Here, even the simplest things seemed miraculous. Alex had already prepared breakfast, a modest spread of bread, fruits, and eggs. His hands moved with practiced ease, chopping, stirring, arranging. "You'll need energy today," he said with a small smile. "There's much to learn about this world." Soraya hesitated, then sat. She watched him, her violet eyes wide. There was no condescension in his gaze, no sense of superiority. Just calm, steady human kindness. She realized she had never experienced this before. Not from family, not from tutors, not from anyone who called themselves her people. Over the next days, Soraya explored her surroundings. The house was small but cozy, surrounded by forests that stretched for miles. Each step outside revealed something new. Flowers of colors she had never seen, insects that moved with strange purpose, and streams that sang softly over smooth stones. She felt a stirring inside her, a mixture of wonder and cautious hope. Then came Amy, a woman from the nearby village, with red hair and a bright, welcoming smile. She introduced herself simply. "You must be Soraya? I teach at the school down the road. Thought I'd come by and say hello." Soraya braced herself for judgment, for ridicule. Instead, Amy laughed, a soft, musical sound. "I've heard you're new here. That's all. I don't care where you come from. Humans like stories, but we care more about people." For the first time, Soraya felt the weight of her empire lift slightly. Here was someone who saw her as herself, not as the broken princess sent as a joke. Amy became her first human friend. She taught Soraya about local customs, introduced her to neighbors, and explained the rhythms of human life: school, markets, festivals, and even mundane things like how to brew tea properly. Yet, Soraya remained cautious. Her empire had taught her that trust was dangerous. Her instincts urged her to hide, to keep her guard up. But with each shared meal, each laugh, and each story, she felt something crack open inside her, a fragile sense that maybe, just maybe, humans could be allies, friends, even family. Alex, too, became more than a guide. He was patient, careful not to push her beyond comfort, yet gently encouraging her curiosity. They spent hours walking through the forests, discussing the strange differences between the Loran and human ways of life. She found herself laughing at his dry humor, surprised by how quickly she could feel comfortable around him. One evening, they sat on the porch, the sky painted in fiery streaks of orange and pink. "Your world," Alex said softly. "It sounds rigid. Perfect, but cold. You must have felt so alone there." Soraya nodded, her hand brushing against the smooth wood of the railing. "I did. Always. I was never enough, never worthy. Always the mistake, the broken one." Alex's eyes softened. "Here, that doesn't matter. You are enough. You're you. That's what counts." Her chest tightened at the words. They were simple, almost naive, but powerful. She had spent years being judged for what she could not do. Now, someone valued her simply for existing. As night fell, Soraya lay in her room, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the forest whispered with life. The humans had offered her something her empire never could: acceptance, kindness, and perhaps the first glimpse of hope. Hope that she could belong somewhere. Hope that she could matter not for perfection, but for herself. And deep inside, a quiet, almost forbidden thought began to grow. Maybe she could find love here, not arranged, not demanded, but freely given. The idea was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly human. For the first time in her life, Soraya felt that the journey she had dreaded might not be a punishment at all. Perhaps it was the beginning of something greater, a life of her own making, a story she could finally write herself. The days on Earth passed like a quiet tide, gentle but unstoppable. Soraya had begun to adjust to her new life, though every step forward felt like walking a tightrope between fascination and fear. Humans were unpredictable, chaotic, yet there was an honesty in them she had never known on Valos. Even the simplest gestures, like a smile, a shared meal, or a helping hand, carried weight she could not measure in her world of perfection and rules. Alex became her constant companion. He taught her to navigate the small town nearby, introducing her to markets, workshops, and the bustling schoolhouse where children's laughter rang clear through open windows. Soraya observed everything with wide eyes, her violet gaze drinking in the vibrancy of life. There were no shimmering crystal towers here, no precise protocols or invisible hierarchies. Instead, there was chaos that somehow worked. Imperfect, yes, but alive. One afternoon, while walking through a meadow, Soraya noticed something extraordinary. A small group of children had gathered around a makeshift science project, wires, magnets, and small motors spinning in loops. They were experimenting, failing, trying again, and laughing at each mistake. She bent down, curiosity pulling her closer. "What are you doing?" she asked in careful tones. A boy looked up, eyes bright. "We're building a little generator. It's not perfect yet, but it works sometimes." Soraya watched as sparks jumped between the wires, illuminating the children's faces. A strange feeling stirred in her chest, recognition of a drive she had seen in humans before. They failed, yet persisted. They were fragile, yet stubbornly resilient. It was not physical strength that impressed her, it was spirit. She realized she had never seen this on Valos. There, mistakes were punished. Weakness was shunned. Humans, in their messiness, had a kind of courage she had never known. Back at the house, Alex noticed her thoughtful silence. "You're thinking about them, aren't you?" he asked. Soraya nodded slowly. "They keep trying, even when it seems hopeless. I never thought weakness could be a kind of strength." Alex smiled. "Humans survive because we adapt, because we try. And sometimes, trying is more powerful than any perfect plan." That evening, Soraya began exploring more personal boundaries. She cooked alongside Alex, laughing at her mistakes, learning the delicate balance of heat, timing, and taste. Every meal, every small success, felt like a victory against the rigid expectations of her past. She was no longer measured by ability to produce heirs or follow ceremonial rules. Here, she was simply Soraya, and that was enough. Then, something unexpected happened. While examining her reflection in the small mirror of her room, she noticed a subtle warmth in her chest, a flutter, almost like a pulse. She dismissed it at first, thinking it was hunger or nerves. But the sensation grew over the following days. Alex noticed too. "You've been more lively," he said one evening as they walked through the garden. "Happier than I've seen in weeks. Whatever is happening, it suits you." Soraya's heart thumped at his words. Happiness was foreign to her, almost dangerous. On Valos, pleasure was measured, calculated. Here, she felt it rise naturally, like water filling a vessel that had long been empty. She began to wonder if she was more capable than her people had ever allowed her to believe. One night, lying beneath the stars on the porch, Soraya spoke aloud the thought that had begun to form in her mind. "Perhaps humans are stronger than they seem. Perhaps I am stronger than I thought." The wind rustled the trees, carrying whispers of the unknown. And for the first time, she imagined the impossible, not just survival, not just acceptance, but a future she could shape with her own hands. Something deep within her stirred, untested and unafraid. Soraya had arrived on Earth as an insult, a defective princess. But in these quiet days of discovery, she began to understand. She was no longer broken. She was alive, learning, growing. And the humans beside her, with their messy courage and their stubborn hope, were teaching her that the impossible was not only possible, it was inevitable if you dared to try. The weeks blurred into a rhythm of quiet discoveries. Soraya's days were no longer filled with cold corridors and whispers of disdain. They were alive with the smell of fresh earth, the chatter of children, and the steady presence of Alex. Every interaction, every shared meal, every conversation was a lesson in the unexpected strength of humans, and in her own growing courage. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the curtains, Soraya noticed a strange heaviness in her chest. It wasn't pain, exactly, but a persistent, insistent awareness, a pulse she had never felt before. She paused, touching the center of her chest, unsure what it meant. Her mind flickered back to the endless examinations of Valos, the cold words of doctors declaring her incapable. She had believed she was broken. Alex noticed her hesitation. "You're quiet today," he said gently, placing a hand over hers. "Is something wrong?" Soraya shook her head. "I don't know. It's nothing. I think," her voice faltered. "I feel different. Something I cannot explain." He studied her with the kind of careful attention that humans offered without judgment. "Maybe it's a sign," he said softly. "A sign that life can surprise us. That we're stronger than we think." The words lodged in her mind, stirring feelings that were both thrilling and terrifying. She had come to Earth expecting mockery, maybe even rejection. Instead, she had found patience, acceptance, and kindness. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to hope. Days later, during one of their quiet walks through the dense woods near the town, Soraya watched the sunlight dance across the leaves, illuminating the tiny creatures scurrying through underbrush. She noticed patterns in their movements, unexpected ingenuity, cooperation, resilience. Humans were like this, too. Their survival was not about perfection, but about persistence, adaptability, and unyielding spirit. At home, Alex's steady presence continued to nurture her. He asked about her past, not to judge but to understand. He listened to her stories of Valos, the cold ceremonies, the endless expectations, the bitter isolation, and with each tale, he offered not pity but genuine respect. And then it happened. The sensation she had felt weeks ago returned, stronger now. A warmth, a movement within her that was undeniably alive. She froze, staring at her reflection in the kitchen window, fear and awe mingling in her violet eyes. Could it be? Could her body, declared incapable by generations of Valine science, be changing? Alex noticed immediately, his expression shifting from curiosity to stunned realization. "Soraya, are you feeling that?" She nodded, unable to speak. Her body, her life, everything she had believed about herself, it was transforming. The realization settled like fire in her chest. She had been sent as an insult, a defective princess, a joke meant to humiliate humans. But the joke was unraveling in ways no one could have predicted. She was not broken. She was alive. And within her, something extraordinary was growing. A living testament to human resilience, to adaptability, and to the unpredictable strength of life itself. Soraya sank into Alex's arms that night, trembling, laughing, and crying all at once. The stars outside her window seemed to shimmer brighter, as if the universe itself was acknowledging the miracle she had thought impossible. Humanity had shown her a truth her empire had never taught. Value was not measured by perfection, status, or obedience. It was measured by courage, compassion, and the willingness to embrace the impossible. And now, Soraya understood, the impossible was happening. The days following Soraya's discovery were a whirlwind of cautious wonder. Every movement of her body, every subtle change, was a reminder that something miraculous was unfolding. Her broken body, deemed incapable by the Valine for centuries, was now carrying life. A human life, Alex's life, intertwined with hers in a way the universe itself seemed to have conspired. She and Alex worked in careful silence, sharing moments that were ordinary but profound, preparing meals together, walking through the dense forests, watching the sunset spill gold across the mountains. Yet beneath the calm, tension simmered. Soraya knew the Valine Empire had sent her to humiliate humans, expecting ridicule or rejection. They had assumed humans would fail where their advanced science had declared success impossible. But Soraya was learning something they had never understood. Humans thrived on unpredictability. Their ingenuity, their capacity to adapt, to love, to fight when hope seemed lost. These were forces far stronger than any crystal throne or artificial decree. And now, those forces were reshaping her world in ways even she could barely comprehend. Weeks passed. The movement inside her grew more pronounced, undeniable. Alex was at her side, his quiet support a constant reminder that life did not need approval to be real. And then, one evening, a secure communication from Valos arrived. A delegation, unannounced, had set course for Earth. They had heard rumors of her condition, whispers of the impossible, that the infertile Valine princess was carrying a human child. The message was formal, cold, and edged with skepticism. "We will verify this personally," it read. The words were meant to intimidate, to remind her that the Empire never forgot insults or mistakes. Soraya felt a thrill of fear, but also defiance. They had underestimated humanity. They had underestimated her. When the delegation's ship entered Earth's orbit, it was nothing like the transport that had brought her to this world. This vessel was massive, ornate, a symbol of Valine authority. Soraya stood beside Alex, her hand resting on her belly, her pulse steady despite the storm of anticipation. The Valine arrived in full regalia, physicians, scientists, and courtiers, all expecting to witness failure, humiliation, and the final proof that humans were unworthy of interstellar respect. Among them was Soraya's sister, Lysira, radiant and untouchable, her every movement dripping with confidence. Her gaze met Soraya's for the briefest of moments, sharp with disbelief and curiosity. Examinations began immediately. Human doctors, who had supported Soraya from the beginning, worked side by side with the Valine specialists. Scanners hummed, instruments blinked, and data streamed in ways both species had never seen before. The verdict was undeniable. The child inside Soraya was healthy, stable, and biologically remarkable. Human DNA had bridged the gaps Valine science claimed were insurmountable. Her pregnancy was real, and it was proof that humans, their resilience, their adaptability, and their unyielding spirit could achieve the impossible. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Valine courtiers and scientists who had expected humiliation now faced awe. Soraya, once dismissed as worthless, now stood at the center of a revelation that could reshape the galaxy's understanding of life itself. Alex squeezed her hand. "You've done what no one else could," he whispered. "You've shown them the truth." Soraya met his gaze, her eyes alight with determination. "Not just me," she said softly. "Humanity. They've never seen what we're capable of." The Valine delegation exchanged stunned glances. The so-called defective princess was carrying a miracle they had declared impossible. And in that revelation, Soraya knew the joke had failed. The humans had won. The morning sun spilled across the mountains, painting the world in gold and rose. Soraya felt the first sharp pangs of labor, a mix of fear, wonder, and anticipation coursing through her. The moment she had dreamed impossible, yet now faced head-on, had arrived. Alex stayed close, his hand never leaving hers, steady and warm, grounding her amidst the chaos of sensations. The medical team, a blend of humans and Valine experts, worked in precise harmony. Instruments unfamiliar to human eyes hummed, scanning and monitoring, but the tension in the room was unmistakable. This was more than a birth. It was a test of everything Soraya had been told she could never accomplish, everything humanity had been dismissed as incapable of. Hours passed in a rhythmic struggle. Soraya gritted her teeth, fought against exhaustion, and breathed through each wave of pain. Outside, the Valine delegation waited, their expressions unreadable, a mix of disbelief, curiosity, and unease. Lysira, her sister, stood apart from the group, silent, watching. For the first time, she saw Soraya not as the defective sibling, but as someone extraordinary. Then, with a final, agonizing push, a cry rang out. A sharp, clear note of life that seemed to echo across the mountains. The child was born. Perfect, tiny, and miraculous. Silver skin with a warmth no Valine child had ever possessed. Large eyes that reflected both Soraya's wisdom and humanity's soulful depth. A hybrid, a bridge between worlds, a living testament to possibility. Alex held the baby first, his eyes wide with tears. She's real," he whispered. "She's ours." Soraya's heart swelled. Every doubt, every slight, every word of dismissal she had endured faded into insignificance. The baby, small and delicate, stirred in Alex's arms, reaching out instinctively. Her name came to Soraya naturally. Lumina, a spark of new light in a universe that had once tried to write them off. The room fell silent, even the Valine delegation holding their breath. Lord Xanthier, the chief imperial physician, stepped forward, scanning the child with meticulous care. His expression shifted slowly from skepticism to awe. "This is impossible," he admitted. The genetic structures, they fused seamlessly. Healthy, strong, remarkable. Lysira's voice trembled as she spoke, barely above a whisper. You've done what we could not. You've shown them, and us, the power of choice, of courage, of humanity. Her eyes softened, a rare vulnerability showing. Soraya met her sister's gaze. I was never broken, she said quietly. I was just underestimated. In humanity, we never give up. We adapt. We endure. We grow. The Valine delegation exchanged hurried, tense glances. Protocols would need rewriting. Diplomatic strategies reconsidered. But Soraya and Alex no longer cared about approval from a world that had mocked them. Their focus was here, on this new life, on the home they had built together, and the family they were now complete. Outside, the sun rose higher, spilling light across forests and mountains. Lumina's tiny hand clenched Alex's finger instinctively, a reminder of the connection between species, the resilience of life, and the unexpected miracles that could emerge when compassion met courage. Soraya held Alex close, the baby cradled between them, and whispered, "They sent me as a joke, but look, we changed everything." And in that moment, humanity's quiet strength, its boundless ingenuity, and its unwavering heart shone brighter than any empire, any throne, any crystal hall ever could. The princess, once discarded as worthless, had become the mother of a new era, a bridge between worlds, and proof that even the smallest, most underestimated spark could ignite a revolution of hope. The galaxy would never forget this day.